Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest today is Stew Friedman. This will be those of you who know the show know that Grace Under Pressure talks about interviews thought leaders and doers like Stew, who are changing our world for the better. And Grace Under Pressure deals with what's too often reviewed or regarded as the soft stuff, the caring, the connecting, the conviction we feel or compassion we show toward others. And when you do it as a leader, it means bringing people together for common cause and energizing the organization. Welcome, Stew Friedman. It's an honor to have you on the show.
John, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Well, what guests don't know is that you and I have known each other for well over 20 years, and you were instrumental in helping me jump into my second career as an author and teacher and things like that. So I say thank you. I can do it publicly now. So other than helping me, Stew has been a professor of organizational psychology at Wharton School, and he's been on faculty since 1984. He is now the esteemed emeritus. His pioneering work was in the work-life integration process, which he began 30 years ago. So he's been recognized on Thinkers 50 in their top 50. Steve received many distinguished achievements awards. You're the author of a couple of best-selling books. And when we crossed paths, first at Ford Motor Company, where you were running the leadership development program, you created something called Total Leadership, which we will talk about, and later became a book, a best-selling book. And your work is seminal, and I truly mean that. It's changed my life, and I share it widely. So, and you've got two best-selling books, one of which is Total Leadership, Be a Better Leader, Have a Richer Life, and Leading the Life You Want, Skills for Integrating Work and Life. And we want to talk about your newest book, which you're co-authored, and it's called Parents Who Lead. So let's jump into it. Welcome, Stew Friedman.
Thanks again, John. It's really good to be here.
Great. So we're in the second year of our pandemic. Any changes you have noticed over the past year or more recently now? So.
Life is different now. That is for sure for so many of us. So many ways that our work and family lives have become enmeshed. We're living at work and working from home, so many of us. And that has created all kinds of new challenges for working families and new opportunities for innovation in how we organize our lives and how we lead our lives. So yeah, there's been a lot of changes, a lot of pain, a lot of loss and grief over what has been lost. It is spring now, and we're hopeful about a better tomorrow, but it has been a painful year for sure.
I'm glad you touched on the concept of grief, not to be a downer about it, but as we look forward and as it's a topic that we can't shunt aside, because I think there's been a loss certainly of 525,000 people have died in our country, but also just what you talked about, a loss of work, a loss of comrades, perhaps for some, a loss of identity. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, as leaders, we have to deal with the present reality first and foremost, and not delude ourselves or disguise the things that we see and know to be true. And so it begins there with identifying what's real, what's true, what's happening now, and envisioning a better tomorrow that's realistic and that allows you to picture what that better tomorrow looks like so that you can bring others along with you. But the beginning part is where are we now?
Right.
Who are we now? What do we want to become?
Right. And your book, Parents Who Lead, I have a copy right here.
Wonderful.
Cool. Came out just before COVID, did it not? I remember I did something on it. It was last January? Or
we are recording on March 9, 2021. The publication date of that book was March 10.
Oh, okay.
2020.
Okay.
So
So,
happy
okay.
birthday,
Yeah.
parents of Reed.
Hey, great. Perfect timing then. So anyway, I have said something, and I truly mean this, that parents who are have their working full time and have their children at home full time, they're the heroes. I truly say this because they're working. I don't know how they're navigating. I'm a grandfather, so it's all in my past. I mean, the child raising, but I imagine how difficult it is. And so that's why your book is perfect for our time. So what are you learning about this now? So,
Well, my co-author and I, Alyssa Westring, who's a professor at DePaul University in Chicago and herself a mother of 2 kids under 12, we've
he's a
been
hero, heroine, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
we've been doing a lot of talks with all kinds of groups and organizations about this book over the last year. And I think the main thing we're discovering is that the science of leadership really does make sense as a set of tools that parents can use to help them navigate the difficult and uncharted waters that we're in right now. And that's what we've tried to do with this book, is to take what we've been learning from decades of research on what it takes to lead effectively and apply those same principles to parenting partnerships, people who are raising kids together. And what we found is that, we didn't write this book for a pandemic time. That was not in the plan, but it turns out that it is really well suited for these times, because the ideas and tools in it are helpful in grounding people in what matters most to them, to their families, what a better tomorrow can realistically look like, and practical, concrete actions that you can take to start to move in that direction, and to give yourself and your family and other people in your life a greater sense of peace and progress.
Excuse me. One of the things that is top of mind in so many organizations I know that we both work with are the topic of values. You talk about values in the parenting book. So what's that all about, and how can parents discover it if they don't already know it? So
I'm glad you asked about that, because that's really where we begin, and it's kind of the beginning and the end of your leadership story, anyone's leadership story. What do you stand for? What do you care about most? And so that's where we start. We ask parents to identify the values that they hold most dear, and we give them some examples and tools for doing that, including an examination of where they invest their time now and attention in relation to the different parts of their lives and how important those different parts of their lives are to them. So we ask them to take what we call the 4-way view: your work, your home, your community, and your private self. However you define those 4 domains, how important is each domain to you? Take 100 points, divide those up accordingly. And then thinking about your attention in a typical week or month over the last year. Where is your mind during your waking hours? Another 100 points, divide them up. And then rate yourself in terms of how satisfied your sense of well-being is on a simple scale of 1 to 10 in each of those different parts of your life. And that very quick 2-minute exercise, we ask parents to do that for themselves, for their partners, guess what their partners will say, and then come together to talk about what their 4-way views look like with respect to what's important and where they devote their attention. That opens up all kinds of creative conversations about what they can do differently.
And I'm going to guess that women rate themselves very harshly, and guys think I'm fine. Are you finding it?
Men tend to overestimate how much they attend to the home environment and the family domain. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And that creates the opportunity for important conversation. So that's one of the few exercises that we do. Another is simply note 5 or 6 statements that say to the world, what is most important to you? What is it? Is it justice? Is it education? Is it responsibility? Is it grace? Is it love? Is it material gain? What are the most important things to you? And then define your vision of the future. We have a simple way for people to do that as well. And by simply describing an ideal day 15 years from now, what do you do throughout the day? and what's the impact you're having on the world.
That's an interesting thing, because I look back at you and I are both grandparents, and when my children were young, I honestly couldn't even conceive of them being in high school and let alone college. And now they're both grown and wonderfully fortunate. They're doing well. So how does that must be a big question for a parent, is it not?
Well, it's a challenging activity for anyone to do at any life stage. But my belief is that anyone can be a better leader and have a richer life. That's fundamental to all the teaching I've been doing over the last now almost 4 decades. And that leadership is about bringing people along with you to a better day. It's not about position or your role in a hierarchical organization. It's about inspiring people to come with you to a better tomorrow. And once you have a clearer sense of what you stand for, your values, we ask people to talk about where they've come from, the critical episodes in their life histories that have shaped their values. These are some of the ways in which we help them become clear about their values, and then to transform those, or rather to use them in identifying what does that better tomorrow look like. Yeah. And it does require an active imagination, and some people get stuck and they need encouragement, but everyone can do it. You just have to unlock that creative potential and get past the inhibitions that people sometimes have about courageously and candidly identifying, well, what do I really want my life to look like 15 years from now, which is really just a projection of how you feel today about what matters most to you now. So it's difficult, it's challenging, leadership is, but really worthwhile.
Well, I like the way, it's obvious because the title of the book is Parents Who Lead. And honestly, I until you and Alyssa came up with the concept, I hadn't thought of parenting as a leadership. And of course it is. And so I like the way you get, and throughout the book, you keep coming back to this is what leaders do, and by parents. So it's a wonderful mixture. Now, you said something in there about values being important and things, but also one's past life, what experience that shape us. That's part of our humanity. Can that sometimes be crippling, perhaps, in parenting if one has had a tough childhood?
Well, no one has it, entirely easy. It's all relative, of course. Everybody has a different life and a different leadership story. And all we can do is access our own. Yeah. And indeed, for too many people on our precious planet, that the story of their origins are just filled with pain and disappointment. Right. That is true. Yeah. But we also know that to have a foundation for growth as a leader, no matter what your circumstances, as I said at the top, you got to start with what's true, what's real about where you've come from, how things are now, and from that point, start to look to what do I want my world to look like? What steps can I take now that are within my control that move me a little closer to that vision, and to do so in a way that the people around me feel is good for them too. Right. And that's kind of the essence of what leaders do. Think about what matters most, picture what a better world looks like, and then figure out what realistic steps they can take to get there with the people that they need support from. And that's really what the book is all about.
Right. And you have something, you stated this at least twice so far, and I like this, that the fact leaders can always create a better world, or at least a better world for themselves and their teams, whatever. So, and then you have a concept in the book called the new you. Is that what you're getting at, to create this new you, a new attitude, a new...
What we find is that when people take a step back and think about what matters most and where they want to go, and to share that with their partners in parenting, and to come up with a collective vision of the future that they both are excited about, the path that they want to walk together, which in itself is a big intervention for many parenting partnerships. That's the first big piece. The second piece is, who are the most important people in our lives? In addition to our children, what about the people we work with, our extended family, our friends, caregivers, etc.? And what do those people need from us? What do we need from them? And then we help people figure out how to engage in meaningful dialogue with all those stakeholders, including and starting with their kids, about mutual needs and expectations. What do we really need from each other? We have some well-honed, proven methods for opening up conversation that give you a realistic picture of what the people around you think, what they feel, what they see when they look to you. And it's usually less than what you thought. It results in less pressure and more freedom to try new ways of doing things. So with all that new insight about what matters most, who matters most, and greater connection with those people, you're freer to try new ways of doing things. And so we help people develop experiments that are designed to make things better for them, for their families, as well as for their work and their communities. And then they do those experiments together. And what they discover is that they've got more power, more freedom than they thought. And that's kind of what the new you is about, to realize that you've got more support and love surrounding you than you might have thought, and probably more freedom to move in a direction you want to go than you might have thought as well.
One of the things I like about the book is that you use the word experiment, and that's not often a word associated with parenting. Although, frankly, if we go through parenting, it's one grand experience or experiment.
It is indeed.
None of us have really done it before until we're in it. You know, you can read all the books in the world.
And of course, every child is different, and every family is different.
Absolutely.
And this is what we know about what leaders do. The effective ones, they are people who are good at not only inspiring others to follow them, but also in creating harmony among the different parts of their lives. That's what total leadership is all about. And we've applied those ideas to families. And you know, it's knowing what matters, who matters, and then continually trying new ways of getting things done that are good for you and for them.
And there's a word that you've used a couple times here, and I like, it's in the book, of course, and this concept of experiment. And it's also, you say the payoff, or I'm saying the payoff is more freedom. It almost seems antithetical in parenting, but explain what you mean by the freedom then. So,
well, if you ask people just off the top, you know, how's it going now? And I've been asking this question of literally thousands of people in the last few months. Most working parents will tell you they feel stressed, overwhelmed, tired, frustrated, sorrowful, grateful, but there's a lot of pain, and they don't see what they can do differently. And by systematically thinking about themselves as leaders, which is a shift in mindset, as you know, John, it's not a normal way to think about yourself as a parent. But what Alyssa and I are saying is that parenting is the leadership challenge of your life, and that it's a really important one to do the best you can with, for your own sake, your kids' sake, and everyone's really. And so what we find is that this idea of small wins, experiments, things that you can do now that make things better for you and your kids and each other and the people around you, that has been shown to create less stress, a greater sense of peace and harmony, and a greater sense of freedom and control over your life. It's not that complicated, but most of us don't take the time to do it, or don't think we have the capacity.
What you said, this is the leadership of our lives. It is a grand experiment. But hey, let's face it, we all make mistakes. And so there's something inherent in parenting. And you talk about it, and it's top of mind now on almost every show I've done recently, and the topic of resilience. How does that play into parenting? So.
Well, we know from evidence that we've been studying now, having taken people through this program now for the 2 decades since we created it when I was at Ford Motor Company, that mental health improves, people become more resilient as a result of practicing this method that is actually about learning how to learn more effectively, to adjust and adapt to challenging circumstances. And that's what really resilience is all about. Intelligently responding to the changes in your environment, rooted in a sense of purpose for your life. So that's an outcome that we see time and again with people who are willing to invest some of their attention in growing as leaders in their lives, and specifically as parents.
Great. No, because it's such a, I mean, I've always thought of resilience as that ability to bend, but not break and come back. But there's also and you're getting to it, the learning process. And it's also the transformative process, because what we left is not there. We're in a new world. We are adapting. And you link this, and I think it's a good point. It's linked to our purpose, is it not?
Yeah, that is the root, as we said at the top. It begins with values and it kind of ends with that as well. Without some sense of a code or purpose or values, whatever you want to call it, but just knowing what matters, it's impossible to lead. It's the sine qua non. You have to have it. And the good news is that it's accessible to all of us if you just look.
Now, I want to take a little segue in here, because it's my opportunity to talk about total leadership and the 4 domains that you mentioned. And literally, I probably, many of my teaching engagements, speaking engagements, and probably every coaching engagement I've ever had, I talk about total leadership. So I probably owe you some things, Stu. So anyway, but I like the concept, the way you define it, and of integration, not balance. Explain that. So.
Well, yeah, balance is bullshit. It is not real. It doesn't exist in the sense that most of us think about it. Balance. When you have balance, you've got the scale image, right? And the problem with balance is that, first of all, it's unattainable. To have a perfect equilibrium among the different parts of your life at one time. It's always dynamic. And when you think about balance, well, let's say this is my professional life, my work, and this is the rest. So the balance model looks something like this. Now, what's the problem with what's happening here? I'm getting more power, more prestige, more responsibility, more recognition. Things are great, right?
Yeah.
I'm flying high. What?
Yeah.
What's happening with the rest of my life? So you naturally think trade-off. You naturally think zero-sum game. Right. In 1998, I wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review. It was called "Work and Life: The End of the Zero-Sum Game," which was the beginning, really, of our bringing these ideas about being real, knowing what matters, being whole, knowing who matters in the different parts of your life, and being innovative, continually experimenting with how you get things done. That's where we realized it's not about it's not about balance. It's about harmony and integration, which you can achieve over the course of time. So a better metaphor than the balance metaphor, which forces you to think in terms of trade-offs. Well, I have to give up. I have to sacrifice everything to be successful. And that's a common mythology. And certainly we all have in our heads examples of people who've done that. But what we have found through now decades of research is that it doesn't have to be that way. And indeed, there are many, many, many incredibly significant and successful people who got there, not because they were forsaking the other parts of their lives, but because they were devoting themselves to the other parts of their lives. That's what gave them purpose, strength, and resilience, and the capacity to persist in the face of difficult times, obstacles, and resistance. Right. So it doesn't have to be a trade-off. And when you think trade-off, you lose the opportunity to see the potential for positive impact in your life in all the different parts. You just have to be creative about that.
Let me jump in here, because I thought of this question here. Does your research show or experience show that women are better at integrating the domains of their life than men, or is it gender neutral?
I don't think I can say definitively whether there's a difference between men and women. I think the patterns are somewhat different. Certainly in our society, socialization matters a lot. and the values that women have held, the values that men have held about their roles in society have changed. I've done some research on how those values have changed. And so that makes things different, but there are different challenges that men and women face, and those are changing. The good news is that men and women are becoming more allied in their interests in our society. That, I think, that bodes well for a more egalitarian future and better for our kids.
Great. And one of the concepts that I often talk about, and when I coach senior leaders, is a domain that is often forgotten, and that's self.
Yeah.
And now it's, in a way, it's become more of a buzz term, the self-care. But I've often found, and I don't know if you do, but leaders are outward directed. And so the person that they ignore are themselves, which is not healthy. So talk about cultivating an awareness of self needs.
Well, that is a great question, John, because you can't serve others if you are not caring for yourself. You can't be compassionate and graceful towards other people if you're not that way with yourself. So it's essential to focus on the self domain. And my evidence from our studies is just that like, for example, we ask people to rate how well things are going in the different domains of their lives, just as we did at the top here on the four-way view exercise.
Yeah.
The self domain is always rated lowest, always, in groups that we do this with. And at the same time, when we ask 4 months later, after they've gone through all the exercises in our workshops and program of looking at what matters, who matters, and talking to those people and then experimenting, that all takes a few months. When we ask those same set of questions again about how things are going, we find that the greatest gains are in the area of the self, because people are more focused on themselves, because they're looking at how they can make themselves stronger and more capable about contributing to the world around them. And of course, that starts with taking care of themselves first. So they get over the sense of guilt or anxiety about trying new things, because they think more like leaders. How can I take care of myself in a way that's going to be helpful to others?
Absolutely, and that's great. And I think what you've done then in those exercises is give people permission to think about themselves, which is, we are taught that that's selfish, whether we act on it or not. But and I think that's why your exercises are so good, and something I emphasize you can't take care of yourself. If you do not take care of yourself, as you said, you cannot be an effective leader. And I like the way you linked it into compassion too. Self-compassion is so important. When we're beating ourselves up all the time, we end up withered. And how much more do we have to give? Stu, we are racing along in this show, but as I always like to ask guests, do you have a story of grace you would like to share? So
that's a lovely question, and I'm so glad that is a motif running through your work, John, because we need more of it in the world. I think of my teachers and how grateful I am for all that I have learned from so many people on whose shoulders, I am trying to stand and to do right by. The teachers of my life, and there are many, I am extremely grateful for the grace they bestowed to me in sharing parts of their lives and their wisdom with me.
That's great. That's wonderful. I think you're the first person to mention teachers, but how I know I'm blessed by teachers. I've really had far more great teachers, and they're good teachers, than bad. And so, yeah, I'm glad. Let's shout out to teachers, because they change our world, and it links into our parenting story, Parents Who Lead, because parents are teachers, are they not?
Yes, and more so during this pandemic, which has raised the awareness of people in our country about the great work that our teachers of children in our schools do. My youngest child is a teacher, and what she has been doing and all of her colleagues around the country requires, I think, greater attention and value in our society. I think we should be paying teachers what we pay investment bankers, and pay investment bankers what we are paying teachers. What do you think, John?
I'm down with that. I am down with that, because teachers are unsung heroes, and they give so much. And I know so many teachers. I know I've been blessed, and you just gave a long thing, but they are a fabric of our community, and we are some of our education, and so it is so critical. Yeah, I'm all for that. So, Stu, this has been fun, because I have known you. We are friends, and I have borrowed your work, cited your work countless times. So it's an honor to have you. How can people find you?
Well, I am on LinkedIn, where I have a course for premium users. It's about leading with values. You can go to totalleadership.org to find out all about my work. There's free videos, chapters of my books, and articles of all kinds. You can get a lot of resources there, including links to my podcast, which is a version of the weekly radio show that I do, that you have kindly appeared on. It's called Work and Life. It's on Sirius XM channel 132. So you can listen in there and find free podcast versions at totalleadership.org.
We will put that in the notes. Stu, it's been a pleasure. So thank you very much for being on Grace Under Pressure today. So
thanks so much for having me, John.